Hello, everyone, and welcome to our issue briefing on school climate and LGB youth in California. My name is Lori Turkbachakchu with the Lucille Packard Foundation for Children's Health Kidsdata program, and I'll be moderating today's briefing. First, I have a few housekeeping items before we get started. Our briefing is scheduled for 30 minutes, but our speakers will be staying on past that time to answer your questions. So please be sure to enter them in the GoToWebinar question box. All attendees are muted. The 30-minute portion of our briefing will be recorded and archived on our website, and its location will be shared with all registrants via email. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's briefing. Jenny Betz is a school climate specialist in WestEd's Health and Justice program, where she engages with schools and districts to improve school climate and wellness. She also has led national campaigns, programs, and resource development addressing LGBTQ issues in K-12 schools. Also with us is Hannah Herrick, who is a sophomore at UC Berkeley and identifies as bi-pansexual. Hannah volunteers with the Pacific Center for Human Growth, the oldest LGBTQ center in the Bay Area. She leads discussions and provides peer support for LGBTQ youth at local middle schools. During today's briefing, Jenny will share the latest research on school climate and LGB youth. Next, Hannah will provide a student perspective on her experience from high school. We'll then open the briefing for questions. Before our speakers get started, I'll provide a quick overview of where to find the data related to this briefing on kidsdata.org. In our Youth in Schools data release, you can find data on a dozen topics as you see listed here. If you're interested in an overview of the data or more information on the surveys that the data come from, you can listen to our 30-minute recording of our previous webinar available at kidsdata.org/youthinschools. It's listed at the bottom of the slide there. We actually have another set of indicators that's not listed here. Just this past Tuesday, we released data on transgender youth. You can get to these by going to the demographic topic on the website, or again, you can also find them at kidsdata.org/youthinschools, which is a special page set aside on our website. So we will formally announce this next week, so you're actually the first to hear about this new release. For today's webinar, we're focusing on the topic school climate. In particular, we'll be looking at the data breakdown by sexual orientation. All of the topics that you saw on the previous slide that are student level are broken out by sexual orientation, or whether students identify as LGB, straight, or unsure. The quickest way to find these data is to go to kidsdata.org/youthinschools and select the indicator of interest, or you can find them by going to the appropriate category and topic in the main part of the site. When we started looking at these data broken out by sexual orientation, we found wide disparities across many indicators of health and well-being. We not only wanted to bring attention to these alarming percentages, but also focus on approaches to address these disparities. And this inspired us to develop this issue brief and to host this webinar. If you haven't already done so, please read the issue brief, which provides key data findings and approaches to policy, and please share it widely with your network. And with that, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Jenny Betz, to share current findings on school climate.
Thanks so much, and hello everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I want to take us a step back really quick and sort of talk from the larger school climate context. So one of the ways that we understand this and why this matters, why school climate matters, why talking specifically about LGB experiences matter, we use this iceberg, right? And so when we talk about school climate, the things above the iceberg are all the things we can see. They're the policies, programs, our curriculum, our practices, all the things, actual behavior of students and adults on school campuses. And that really, though, is only a small part of what's going on at each school, right? there's all this other stuff that's below the water that's about who we are, what our values are, how we interact with each other, and both, you know, as a system and as individual people within that school, everybody's individual identities and thoughts and bias even and experiences. So, you know, when we're talking about making schools better for everyone, we can't only focus on those things above because they're actually driven by all the things below. So that's why we really can't ignore the things below the surface. Next slide. Oh, sorry, one more. And one more. Didn't realize it had those. So the reason that climate matters is not just for these sort of like, you know, sometimes people think like, oh, we just want to give everybody a pass and school's about feeling good and not learning. But really, positive school climates are the driver for success, both for students and educators. So when we have schools where people feel good and feel safe and feel part of the school community, students are much more likely to be engaged. They're more likely to feel connected to school, which is a huge indicator around well-being. They show up to school more and they do better in academics. And similarly for educators, when schools are a good place to work and be, they are better teachers, more invested in their students. They like their jobs more and they're likely to stay at their jobs longer. So the climate stuff really is the key to making sure that our schools are meeting all the needs of our students and staff, but also really, you know, having schools really meet their potential by making sure they're focusing on everyone. Next slide. So within that, right, today we're talking about lesbian, gay, and bisexual students. We're specifically talking about sexual orientation, and I just wanted to give a quick overview of how it relates to a couple other things. So some of you may have seen the topic for this webinar and said, LGB, where's the T? Where's the T for transgender? And it's not that Kidsdata forgot the T. It's that it's really important for us to understand the difference between some of these concepts and identities. So this great thing from genderbread.org is really an awesome way to look at it, that really we have gender, which is how we feel about ourselves, right, in terms of our gender and how we express that to the world. We have anatomical sex and the sex that you're assigned at birth, so whatever they mark on your birth certificate. And then we have sexual orientation, which is who we're attracted to and who we love and that sort of thing. If we can go to the next slide. So we're focusing today, oh, back one. Sorry. So we're focusing today on that sexual orientation piece, not because the piece about gender doesn't matter or isn't studied, as we heard, there's new info out, but because they aren't the same and we need to look at them different. You know, everybody has a sexual orientation, including our transgender students, right? So if we looked at that as a whole group, we'd really be missing some of the nuances. We don't want to lump, you know, sexual orientation and gender together because it would really, it would miss the uniqueness of the experience of those layers of identity. And the more, really on any topic, the more we can disaggregate the data, the clearer the picture becomes and the better we can support all of our students in the ways that they need. Because in addition to sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, all of our students also have identities and experiences related to their race and ethnicity, their religion, their socioeconomic status, and a whole host of other things that play into not only who they are and how they feel about themselves and express themselves, but how the world sees them and how they move through the world. Next slide. So the data, right, whether it's from this Kidsdata brief, or there's data from a number of organizations. The Kidsdata brief comes from the California Schools, California Healthy Kids survey, and there are a number of surveys and studies that have been done across the country that show really what's going on for LGBT students and LGB students in particular. So what we're seeing and what you saw in the brief, and if you're coming to this webinar, you probably already understand this, right, is that our LGB students have higher levels of victimization, which can be verbal and physical harassment, it could be assault, it could be cyberbullying, all those different things that happen. They have often higher levels of discipline, especially for things that non-LGBT or LGB students, don't get disciplined for. A great example is actually around public displays of affection. So there's still a lot of our students who are LGB who are getting in trouble, whether they're getting, detention or even, other forms of discipline for having, hugging or kissing their partner, when the, straight students basically are doing the same things and not getting in trouble for it. And so that already is a problem. There also is some data out there showing that lesbian students in particular, in some areas, are facing harsher discipline than other students. So we layer that in, and then again, when we layer in things like race and ethnicity, and we know there's already disproportionate discipline around those things, then it really gets compounded, and all of that then plays into school to prison pipeline and those sorts of things. So it's really important. Something like, public displays of affection maybe isn't that big of a deal, but it connects to this bigger system of disproportionality and really problematic things going on in schools. And then, of course, not surprising, our LGB students have fewer support. So fewer things that are specifically supporting them, fewer adults that they can go to or feel that they can go to, that sort of thing. And what we need to understand is that the negative outcomes that we see and we hear about all the time, which are, increased feelings of depression and other mental health things going on, risky behavior, unhealthy behavior, lower attendance, lower grades and test scores, and lower educational aspirations. So students, and whether or not they think they're going to go to college or have a good job or do well in life, right? That those things are really problematic, and sometimes we only focus on that, and we may talk about LGB or LGBT students in this way of like them being at-risk students, and I just want to make sure that we remember that that those things are not inherent to LGB students. They don't, they're not born with an increased potential for missing school, right? Or doing risky behavior. It's really that they're experiencing this increased victimization, discipline, fewer supports. And we really need to know that those outcomes are direct consequences from a society, schools, families, and individuals that indirectly and directly, even through violence, right, tell them all the time that they're not okay, they're not worthy, they're not normal. So that's why we have these outcomes. So it's not just about how do we help our LGB students, which that's an issue, but it's really about how do we continue to have environments that get better for students so that they don't feel those things and experience those things in the first place. So it's not about fixing LGB students, it's really about creating better environments for them. Next slide. So one of the things that I think is really important, and I've done this work for a long time, is talking about resilience. And you know, we talk about resilience and young people a lot. We talk about, you know, there are different terms. Sometimes the buzzword is grit or resilience or, you know, strength, all these different things. And really, I think it's important to look at it in two pieces. So we really have to see and respect that internal resilience that students have, that our LGB students have, and that we know they have, because if they are alive and at your school, then they already have these strengths and resilience internally. And as adults, our job is to provide the right conditions for them to learn and grow, and to support their strengthening of those existing resilience factors, and building new skills and strategies for school and life. So it's not that as adults we make students resilient. It's that we see their strength already in their resilience, just in their survival, especially those who have faced a lot of really negative experiences. And we find ways to support their own development, and by making the surrounding environment safer and more affirming and more inclusive. Because really, as adults, we can't save anybody, right? We're there to be allies and to support them and make sure that students can grow on their own. Next slide, please. So some of the most important things to support LGB students, and any of the stuff we've been talking about, right? We could talk about it a whole lot longer, but just as a quick sort of overview, there are a few things that are really, really important. And actually, all of these things are supported by data. And, you know, I'm sure Kidsdata and myself, we're all happy if you want more information to share more data points of where this is coming from. But from multiple sources, what we know really helps LGB students are supportive educators, and also really visible educators, because we often will hear from a very good, very large percentage of adults that relate to schools that yes, they support LGB students and they want to be helpful. But unless as an adult you talk about that openly, or you place a safe space sticker or poster in your room, or you include it in your curriculum or something, students who need to feel that support and know that you're supportive may not know. And it kind of doesn't count. It's not really that helpful, no matter what your intentions are, if the LGBT students don't know how supportive you are. So that's really important. And then curriculum is really important for all of our subgroups, right? Seeing yourself represented in the curriculum is so important to being validated and feeling safe and included. And it's important for non-LGB students to understand that LGB students exist and people exist in the world, and that's okay, and they've contributed to society and all of these things. And with the curriculum piece, we want to look at both passive and active. So passive is saying that it is okay, let's say, if you are opening up students can pick their topic for an essay, that one of the things they could pick would be LGB or LGBT related, which often students get told they can't do that. And then active would actually be teaching directly about some of those things. And in California, we're really lucky to have laws and textbooks coming out, right, that are more directly addressing LGBT people, history, themes, that sort of thing. Then, of course, the physical and emotional safety is really important, especially because we know the higher victimization rates. And just always to remember that, yes, it's about both physical areas and physical victimization, and it's also about that emotional safety, feeling connected to school, feeling like you belong at school, feeling like you can talk to somebody about what's going on if you need to. And then for all students, and especially LGB students, because they may not normally have this or have as much access to opportunities for leadership and school connectedness, are really important. And it's important both in things like gay straight alliances or gender and sexuality alliances, where it's really topic related. And it's also important for LGB students to be able to have leadership positions and opportunities in sort of more general population activities, and to be able to be themselves in those spaces. And then one thing that I wanted to highlight is that I always find interesting, especially in places like California, where really we have the best, most inclusive policies for LGB and LGBT students of anywhere in the country, and have always been on the forefront and continue to have more and more policies that are really, really helpful. And unfortunately, many of our students don't even know those policies exist. Sometimes our teachers don't either. So making sure that students are aware of the things that would support them and back them up also helps them feel better, and then rely on those policies if they are facing some sort of discrimination. Next slide. And finally, I just want to share with you not all of the resources that are out there. There are a lot of things, organizations that are really great, including some in California and some national. And there's 4 that I selected because of their research-based approach, and that you can find data about not just the sort of bad experiences of LGB or LGBT youth, but also the things that really support them, those positive supports, and resources for both educators and students in these 4 places. So GLSEN is a national organization and really has the most comprehensive national and state data on a whole host of different issues school related. The GSA network primarily works here in California, and they're really wonderful, and they do a great job of talking about and working not just on issues around sexual orientation or gender identity, but also looking how that interacts with race and ethnicity and other forms of other pieces of people's identity, and they do really great work around youth leadership. And then there are local LGBTQ centers that are doing great work, including the Pacific Center that I believe Hannah's going to talk about. You can find any of them at lgbtcenters.org. And then Gender Spectrum, which is one of the, I would say, most highly recommended places to go if specifically you're looking for resources on gender, not just gender identity and transgender students, although certainly that's part of what they have, but they have really, really great stuff. They're based here in the Bay Area. They do a lot of work, and they are by far the best in the world at addressing these issues in schools. So those are, it's not an extensive list, but those are some of my favorites that I think are really a great place to start. And with that, I thank you. I went 2 minutes over my time. I want to pass it on to Hannah.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was so informative and very interesting. And now let's welcome Hannah to share her experience.
Hi, I'm Hannah Herrick, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with a homophobic high school administration. So in my senior year of high school, my then girlfriend and I started dating. And interestingly enough, we were the first gay couple in our school's history. So not long into the school year, we started getting approached by supervisors and administration telling us that we needed to stop with the PDA, which apparently meant hand-holding and hugging, because that's pretty much all we did in public since neither of us were out to our parents. Our school was extremely small, which allowed the administrators to find and discipline us relatively easily. At first, honestly, we were just confused, mainly because straight couples would make out between class periods without a word ever said to them. After being threatened with detentions and phone calls home, which would have outed both of us, my school implemented a no PDA policy. It's not that obscure when considering high schools in general, but it's more than a coincidence when suddenly our school implements this policy now, right after our school's first gay couple is out at the school. Mind you, the straight couples, of which there were more than just a few, faced none of the consequences that we did, even after the policy was implemented. My school held an assembly to tell all of the students about the new addition to the student handbook, which was this no PDA policy. Even though the entire school was there, it was perfectly clear that they were only speaking to the 2 of us. So for a brief background on my high school, I attended a brand new school that was extremely small, so every single student knew every single one of the faculty and vice versa. Since the school was so new, when the first gay couple was at the school, they really didn't know how to handle it. It was just completely uncharted territory. So when one of their supervisors confronted us, the entire school admin stood behind them and started enforcing the policy against us before it had even been officially implemented. In fact, they made the policy to support the supervisor's stance and to have a legitimate reason to target us. They were literally changing the rules so they could justify their own hateful behavior. In this experience, there was no attempt by the school to reach any level of resolution. They saw us as a problem and they decided they were going to stop it. We were powerless. Neither of us were out to our families, so we had no adults in our corner that could stand up to the school administration. Any school services weren't even considered as a resource in our eyes, because it was the school itself that was targeting us, not one of our peers. In fact, we didn't even feel as though we could go to our school counselor for help, because this entire experience left us feeling so distanced from our school and the entire administration. It also seemed impossible to fight back, even though perhaps looking back I wish that I had. The school held all of the power because we knew with just one phone call we could be outed to our families. At the time, since I wasn't out to anyone in my family, and many of my friends didn't do much to stand up for the inequality that was happening other than agreeing that it sucked, it honestly felt like we were alone in this, which really took a toll on my mental health. This experience, along with being a part of a Mormon family, really contributed to a large amount of internalized homophobia. I was also terrified of being outed by my school administration or my peers because of the attention being drawn to us by this policy. I began to feel ashamed for who I was, and I felt the need to try to hide it to avoid any further judgment or punishment. And that's exactly what we did. Since we were powerless, we simply had to stop acting like a couple in school. In other words, the school succeeded in silencing us. After graduating, I was able to realize that I wasn't in the wrong, and the school was directly targeting us because they had hateful and homophobic ideologies. I also realized that it was not all my responsibility to fix the situation. Adults around me, such as teachers and other administrators, should have stepped up, but none of them did. Seeing that we were completely powerless in this situation, there were many opportunities for someone to stand up for us, yet no one did. I used to look back on this situation with regret of what I could have done to get justice, but now instead I look back on it and see the lack of concern for equality and justice from the adults around me. This realization definitely helped me move towards self-acceptance, but it certainly didn't erase all the damage that was done. I'd always assumed that my school was a safe space for me, and so to suddenly feel the effects of this double standard was definitely a wake-up call. I had obviously heard stories about the blatant disregard for LGBT rights in the news or online, but you never think that it's going to happen to you. It's easy to assume that the people around you aren't going to treat you any differently when you come out to them because you think that they know you well enough to look past any hate that they may carry. Unfortunately, this was not the case for me, and it's not the case for a lot of people. I had to come to terms with the fact that I was not going to be accepted simply because people were not ready to witness a gay relationship. As a teenager, it's hard enough to come to terms with who you are, but to have to get through the day justifying who you are just because of something as simple as holding hands with your partner is completely uncalled for. Having the privilege I do, being both white and cisgender, I had never experienced this kind of toxic and hateful environment, and if I didn't have these privileges, my experience would likely have been a lot worse. To be scolded and punished solely because you love someone that doesn't fit the heteronormative standards of our society was a level of blatant discrimination that has forever shaped the way that I view the world. This inspired me to get more involved in activism to fight for people in similar situations, as well as other issues of unjustified discrimination outside the LGBT community, to be the person that I wish someone was to me. I now use my experience to motivate me to ensure that everyone has access to a safe space to build a community. Now, being at Berkeley, I know that no one would just let that slide. I know that there is an entire community here that would stand up and fight back for not only me, but for the implications that it has on the entire LGBT community. I'm so thankful to be in a place that would never make me feel ashamed of who I am. It taught me the importance of surrounding yourself with supporting and welcoming people. Coming to Berkeley has allowed me to continue on my journey of self-acceptance, and for that, I'm forever grateful. I also work hard to try to give back to this community however I can. I'm part of an organization at my university called Bear Closet. We are a queer space on campus that emphasizes the importance of community, connection, and giving back. We volunteer often with middle and high schools in connection with the Pacific Center, which is a LGBT youth center, to share our stories and answer questions of students who are queer or questioning or allies. Being a part of a safe and welcoming community taught me so much about myself and my identity, as well as what I want to do with my life. I want to continue to help create these queer spaces and ideally work with queer youth as a counselor or therapist. I think there is so much value in sharing one's experience to educate, spread hope, and to connect with those around you. Berkeley and Bear Closet have both educated me greatly regarding queer issues and have taught me how truly awfully the administration handled this. I hope by sharing my story I can prevent something like this or worse from happening again. I cannot speak for all LGB experiences. However, a collective move towards the acceptance of diversity can do wonders for alleviating the discrimination against queer students. First and foremost, educate faculty and administration. Diversity training is extremely important in exposing people to experiences different from their own. This exposure allows for the acceptance of others. Secondly, create safe spaces in schools for LGBT students so they can feel included and heard. Access to QSAs or GSAs would have changed so much for me in terms of my mental health and stability. Give queer students a platform to share and discuss their issues with others in or outside the LGBT community. Thirdly, create mechanisms through which administration and faculty can be held accountable to not discriminate against their students. If they do, give students the resources and the platform to speak out and stand up for themselves. Finally, schools need to realize the power that they have and use it to benefit all of their students, not just those that fit heteronormative standards. All in all, queer students, just like any other students, simply want to go through school by taking their classes and hanging out with their friends in a safe space where they do not have to be in fear for their life or in fear of being discriminated against. If administrators and teachers make these efforts and try to provide a community for queer students, we can make great strides towards progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for your heartfelt story. We hope Jenny and Hannah's insights will inspire you to take action and inform your programs. And this concludes the briefing portion of our webinar. So I'd like to open up for Q&A, and I do have to say we chit-chatted with Jenny and Hannah a few weeks ago, and so we heard a little bit of Hannah's story, and Jenny told us a little bit about the research that she would be talking about. And Jenny, during that conversation, you had a very I don't know, stark reaction to Hannah's experience because it's something that just should not be happening at this day and age. Jenny, can you share a little bit about your thoughts about Hannah's experience and what could have been happening?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I just want to say, Hannah, you are a rock star, not because you were discriminated against, but because of the work you're doing now and your ability to really be so thoughtful and weave in all the different pieces that were going on. And I think that more than anything I could have said, you really summed the whole thing up. And I am just lucky to be on this panel with you. Really, my first reaction when I heard some of your story, and not even all of it, was just I was mad. And as an adult now, who used to be in your shoes, I really just wanted you to know that it's not your fault. It was never your fault. It is absolutely, and you spoke to this just a minute ago, is absolutely the responsibilities of adults at that school to make sure not only that you're safe, right, and all of that, but surely not to actually make things worse for you. And there are so many legal implications in what you experience that that really are not just inappropriate or, you know, not best practice, but that really conflict directly with California laws. You know, surely things around, you know, discrimination, but also things about threatening to out you and all of that schools cannot do. And I'm just sorry on behalf of adults who didn't support you that that you didn't have more support.
Thank you, Jenny. This concludes our issue briefing. Please refer to our Q&A document available at kidsdata.org/youthinschools to see written responses to attendees' questions. Thank you.